Now you're ready.
Donna read me something this morning in her Bible. I was reading mine, she was reading hers. And she gave me a verse here, and I don't know if I have it marked right. But she said something about a stubborn and obstinate people. I don't know if she was talking to me or about the text in Deuteronomy chapter 6. So I'm just going to go with she was talking about the people there. You know. But anyway, let's get into our scriptures. We're going to look at several scriptures this morning, and I assume that you're putting a bulletin about what was taught years ago in the 30s. Well, I'm using the same verse, but it's not for my full text, but I'm using that. So I don't know, I'm sure the material's out of print, and I haven't seen it, but anyway, we're on the same wavelength there anyway. We're going to start out in Hebrews chapter 10, and we're going to continue with what we were talking about last week about faith and trust in God, and we're going to look at some of the people. And the Bible says, you know, we got a whole cloud of witnesses, chapter 12. And it says we got a whole cloud of witnesses to look at. And we're going to look at some of those as we go. And this morning we're going to look at Abraham a little bit in his life. And he was simply a man willing to follow God. And when you look at a story, it seems like it's unbelievable. But you got to understand where people are in their walk with God. It's not that they're any different than you are. It's just that they're at a different level, a different place in their faith. They're willing to trust more. They're willing to believe more. And we all have the ability to do that. It's just difficult for some to wrap their mind around the fact that I'm believing and trusting in something that I really can't see physically. And that's hard for all of us. It's hard enough to believe what's going on in the world and what you can see. Because you think, why is that going on? And you try to understand that, and you can't understand it because you don't think that way, right? So there we go. All right, let's get going here. There's really two ways to live your life according to Scriptures. One is by sight, and that's how the majority of the world lives, is by sight. In other words, the ways of the world, what they physically can see, what they know themselves, and they basically wind up making decisions based on their own ideas, their own values, their own thoughts, and maybe a little bit of wisdom from their friends and others. And the other people live by faith, and that's a smaller percentage of people. Because the Bible says if you live by sight and not by faith, it's impossible to please Him. Hebrews 11:6. If you're not pleasing God, if you're not obeying God, if you're not believing God and trusting Him and relying on Him and depending upon Him, His involvement in your everyday activity of life is going to be cut off. And I don't know that we miss that or don't understand that to the degree that he's talking about, but we simply have ways where we can just simply cut God out of our lives and His participation in our lives. And He drastically wants to be a part of our life, every aspect of it. Look at Hebrews 10 we looked at last week, verses 35 and 36. He says, don't throw away your confidence. In other words, don't throw this Bible out. Don't throw your faith out. Don't throw your trust out, which has a great reward. And he wants to do this for us. For you have need of endurance. In other words, life, he's getting ready to tell us that life is going to be tough. And nobody here would disagree with that. Regardless of your age, life is going to be difficult. You're going to have pain. You're going to have problems. You're going to have difficulty. You're going to go through some stuff. You're not going to understand why you go through stuff. It's just going to happen. Sometimes you didn't do a thing wrong. Maybe Satan went before the presence of the Lord and they talked about you, and God says, well, go do what you want to do. But spare his life. Spare her life. Don't do this. Don't do that. Okay? You're going to need endurance so that when you have done the will of God, listen, there's the obedience. You may receive what was promised. And then chapter 11, verse 6 that we mentioned a while ago, without faith, it's impossible to please Him. For he who comes to God must believe that he is God, and he's the only God. You can't believe in many gods. There's only one, and if he's not it, then it's somebody else, right? And that he's the rewarder of those who diligently seek him. Over somewhere in the Old Testament, I think it's in 2 Chronicles somewhere, I can't give you the specifics on it, but it says, God searches the world over. His eyes are looking the world over to get behind and strongly support somebody who fully and completely trusts in him. In other words, God is ready to give you anything and everything. He's ready to be a part of your life in a way that you've never comprehended before, if we're willing to do that. And he says, come to him. Okay? Believe that he is God, the only true God. And in John 20:29, I'm just going to reference this and go on, but what he says there, he says, there's people that are standing in front of me that believe, but he said, blessed are those who can't see. That's you and me. Blessed are those who don't see me physically. And then he talks about the rewards in verse 35. There's a great reward for our confidence and our trust and our faith in him. He is ready, and you got to understand this. God is ready and willing to give us everything he has. Isn't that what you do as parents, that you're willing to give your kids anything and everything? But when they're not doing right, and they're not acting right, and they're not living right, you don't keep doing it. You have to perform some discipline. Now, I know that's an ancient term, and that's no longer practiced, but you could probably, some of you have lived long enough that you can remember that term in ways that you don't want to remember that term. He says, trust me. Keep my word. Remember my promises. Rely on me. Depend on me and believe and have faith. Understand God responds to faith. If you want to figure out how you can get God activated in your everyday affairs of life, in anything and everything, is by faith. And I like what Winston read last week in the King James, the New King James, he said. Okay, I don't know the difference between the old and the new, but anyway, it said, faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. What we miss about faith is who we put our faith and trust in. What are you putting your faith and trust in? Is it Jesus, the substance, or is it something else? Do we really put our faith and trust in ourselves and call it Jesus? I don't know. But he responds to that. Faith is saying, now don't stay with me. Faith is saying, I don't see anything, I don't see any evidence, but I trust him anyway. I don't see anything, I don't know too much, there's no evidence that God is going to come through for me, but I trust him anyway. If he never comes through for me, I trust him anyway. If he doesn't do what I ask him to do, I'm going to trust him anyway. Now that's faith. Look at Hebrews 11:1. Faith, mine says, is the assurance. I like the King James better. Faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. Verse 3. By faith, we understand that the universe, everything about it, the worlds were prepared by the word of God. God spoke those into existence so that what is seen was not made out of things which are visible. You get that? What you see out there is all the evidence you're going to need. If nobody ever shared the gospel with you and you died, God said you had all the evidence you're ever going to need that I was here, that I existed. And you're going to miss heaven. Doesn't matter whether anybody has shared the gospel or not. Now that doesn't mean don't share the gospel. It means that they're still responsible because the evidence is out there. Anybody, it's like wearing a watch, an expensive watch or a cheap one. It's like there was an explosion sometime and the watch appeared. Now you'd laugh at that, right? And say, that's ridiculous. Or to go over to the Ford assembly plant and watch, and there's a grenade goes off, and then a bunch of trucks go down the line. That takes more faith than to look around out here and see all the things that we see and thinking some man made that happen, or we evolved it. Where did we start at? There has to be a beginning. We don't want to talk about the end, but there is a beginning. But he says, remember, and he says this word a lot. It's repeated over and over and over and over again. Charles Stanley used to say, listen to me. Listen to me. I'll never forget that. Listen to me. You know why he said that? Because people were sleeping when he was talking. He said, listen to me. Now, nobody sleeps in here. Okay? They just get a quick nap. Faith is acting like God is telling you the truth. Now, that shouldn't be a revelation, but you ever thought about that? Do you act like God is telling you the truth? Sometimes you do it, sometimes you don't. All right? Faith is making decisions based on what God said, even though you don't see anything yet. And obviously, if he hasn't answered your prayer, you don't see anything, right? You don't have any evidence that he's going to do that, other than the fact that you can look back at the Bible and older people in the Bible, like he says, to look at that cloud of witnesses, all those people who came before us who believed, and here's what happened, it's recorded down here. Or you know people that have had answers to the prayer over and over again. And there's evidence that this thing works. You can trust this. It works. Look at Abraham in chapter 11, verses 8 through 10. By faith, Abraham, when he was called by God, he obeyed by what? By going. You're not there yet? Hebrews 11:8. By going. God asked him to take off, and he took off. God asked him to go somewhere, so he went somewhere. Out to a place which he was to receive for inheritance, and he went out not knowing where he was going. He took his GPS away from him. I'm not telling you where he's going. Can you imagine that? Now I can see, his wife in there packing, think that's the dumbest old man I've ever seen in my life. We're leaving, because he was wealthy, and we're leaving all this, and we don't know where we're going. See, women more details than that. Okay? By faith, he lived as an alien in the land of promise. As a foreigner in a land dwelling in tents with Isaac and Jacob. Okay? Verse 10. For he was looking for a city, which his foundations, whose architect and builder was God. Now, three things that we can discover in those verses there about how Abraham lived his life of faith. And if we apply these things, it will change our walk with God. Okay? The first thing is and let me look at Genesis chapter. Listen to this. In Genesis 12, real quick, let me read this and we'll go on. Genesis 12, 1 through 4. Now the Lord said to Abram, go forth from your country and from your relatives and from your father's house to a land which I will show you. Not yet, but I'm going to show you. And I'll make you a great nation, and I'll bless you and make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. Now let me tell you this. He lived his entire life. He lived well over to be 100, and he never saw any of these promises. And I'll bless you. I'll bless those who bless you, and I'll curse those who curse you. I like that.
Amen.
Not really, but he was 75. Now, I don't know if you're 75 or older this morning, but 75. Pack it up. Let's go. I can hear Donna. I'm not going. I shall not be moved. And that's in our hymn book, right? Now, here's the issue. Abraham grew up in a culture and a day and time where hardly anybody believed in God. All right? That's like saying today in America, I live in America today, where most of the nation does not believe in God anymore. You could say that about the whole world. Most of the world does not believe in God anymore. There's been the most mass exodus of people leaving the church in the last, since COVID hit, that's ever happened in the history of the church. You understand that? There's more people who have left the church since COVID than any other time of our existence. Now that's a lot. That says a lot. Most of the guys I know that had big churches have been cut in half. Little ones not affected as bad, but the big ones were cut in half. And most of them have not recouped from it. Because people are at home watching it in their pajamas. They don't send any money to the church. There's no involvement. There's nothing to do. I watch you on TV. See you. Okay? Now, there was another man. He was a king in the Old Testament named Nimrod. Now, I don't know a lot about Nimrod, but I heard that word used when somebody would call somebody a Nimrod. It didn't mean it was a compliment. So I'm going to leave it alone because I really don't understand all that. But here's what he did. He led an insurrection, get this, against God. Losing battle, right? He led an insurrection against God, okay? And God didn't care for that, but most of the people in that day and time followed him. And they went with him. Understand, they had seen God at work. They had seen things that we probably haven't seen or recognized as it being God or a demon or anything else. There's a lot of things that happen because we've seen a lot of weather lately. I don't know if you know this, but there's somebody in control of that. And it's not me and you. And it's not that guy on channel 3 or 11, whatever you all get down here. It's not them. But it's simply life without God. The majority of the people, instead of wanting God, they took life without God. People think they have a better plan than God does. And we're all, sadly this morning, guilty of that thought sometime in our life. Anytime we sin, we're saying, God, I've got a better plan here than you do, so excuse me for 5 minutes, and I'll get back with you. But going back to Nimrod in that day and time and Abraham's day and time, they were progressing in intelligence and science and technology, believe it or not, and they didn't think they needed God anymore. The very source of everything, the Bible tells us that he's the source of everything. He created everything, he made everything, he provides everything. The very source of everything. When you plant a seed in the ground, who's responsible for making that happen? You? No, you just did what he told you to do. You put dirt, you got dirt that belongs to him. Now you got a deed that says it belongs to you, but don't pay your taxes, you'll find out who it belongs to. But it ultimately belongs to God. The Lord gives, and the devil takes away. All right? All right. Does any of this sound familiar? That we forget that God is the source of everything for our lives personally. That's the hardest thing you're ever going to figure out in your life, to wrap your mind around the fact that Jesus is real. He wants to be a part of your life. He's going to bless you if you do, and he's going to discipline you if you don't, to try to win you back. That's what you did with your children. God saw that rather than take his name and live for him after he'd shown them everything that you could show somebody, they thought instead of taking his name, they're going to make a name for themselves. Now here's what God did. Okay? God went down there and stirred everything up with Nimrod. Remember, they all spoke a language and they all were on the same page and they were all going in the same direction? Great military vision, great vision. Get everybody on board, believe the same thing, go in the same direction. God says you can accomplish anything right there. Read Genesis. You can accomplish anything that way. Problem was, they were going against God. That's a losing battle. God came down there, and they no longer all spoke the same language. They no longer all lived in the same place because God scattered them all over the world. You think he didn't do that to Israel over and over again? Why? Because of disobedience. They didn't trust him. They didn't believe. Okay, you don't want to believe in me? Let me scatter you away from your family, away from your friends, and see how you like that. And see, Abraham grew up in that culture. And he says, I want you to go into the same culture, maybe even worse. In other words, if you do, Abraham, if you go, I'm going to show you more when you take that first step. And you keep taking steps that I ask you to take, and the more steps you take, the more I'm going to reveal to you. You understand by now God is not going to give you the whole plan at once? Have you figured that out? He's wanting you to hang in there. You keep taking steps, and I'll keep revealing it to you. You keep taking steps, and I'll keep revealing it to you. It's like teaching a kid to walk. Once they're walking, they start on their own, except with us, we never get free from God. We need him from birth to eternity. You can't stay a pagan, if you understand that word, and still have God in your life. Can't do it. You've got to go. You've got to be willing to follow him. And when he says over and over again in the New Testament to the apostles, he'd walk up to them and say, follow me. Now, they had already heard about him. They knew what he could do and all that. It wasn't just a blind leap there. He had a reputation. They had heard about him. They knew what he could do and all that. And he says, follow me. And they understood in that day and time what it meant to follow him because they had rabbis. And in that day and time, you moved in with a rabbi and you did everything the rabbi told you to do. And you did it exactly like that until he got you to the point where you could become a rabbi and he would turn you loose. If you did what he told you. If not, he would kick you out of the program. Walk by faith, not by sight. Even if you can't see it, even if you have trouble with it, even if you can't wrap your mind around it, even if nobody else believes it but you, he says, believe me anyway. Believe me anyway. You got to trust me. And those are probably two of the most frightening words there are in the world today, is somebody look you eyeball to eyeball and said, trust me. And I think, Now, God calls us to live in this world and to leave the world behind. Now, what I'm talking about is the process by which this world operates. It doesn't operate the way God talks about operating. Our philosophies, our beliefs, our attitude, our actions, he says leave all that behind because it's going to take you places you don't want to go. You think you want to go down that road, but you don't know what the end of that road looks like. Winston called me a while ago, and I was asking about that little bridge coming out this way from Harrisburg. And he said they had a little sign. I thought he was joking. And it says, water in the road, you know. He said, just ignore the sign. I said, yeah, drive right through the water. He said, yeah. Blind leading the blind here, you know. Okay. James 4:4 says, listen, if you don't trust me, and you don't believe in me, and you don't do it my way, you're going to be at odds with me. I don't want to be at odds with God. Now, granted, every one of us here sinned, right? Would you agree with that? Anybody who doesn't sin, raise your hand. All right. Thank you for your honesty. We're at odds with God when we do that. When we do it our way instead of his way, we're at odds with God. You get this? He wrote the book. He created you. He made you. He knows what's best for you. He knows what works. And you think, I just can't do that. Well, just keep being at odds with God. Why do you have problems? Why do you have issues? Why do you have things happen in your life you can't explain? Disobedience. The Bible talks about that over and over and over, again and again and again. See, when we live in a world of entertainment systems, priorities and values, and all the systems and all the operations of this world, the way they function, the way they do things, you're at odds with God. Well, if I do that, I'm going to be at odds with the world. I'm going to look weird. Yes, you probably will. But see, the problem with this, when we live that way, God can't communicate with us. You ever try to talk to somebody who doesn't want to hear what you got to say? You're married? Talk to me. I don't want to talk to you. All right. Jesus, you understand Jesus had to get away from the crowd. Early in the morning, late at night, he'd spend the night away from those guys so he could communicate with the Father, because he couldn't do it with them. Those knuckleheads didn't understand what he was doing. You understand you got to get away from the systems of the world and the things of the world. Sometimes that's that vacation. Sometimes that's that time you just got to, your wife will tell you, I need me time. She's got to recoup. You got to recoup. All right? God said to the 7 churches, he says, you left me for the world. Another time he says, you believe the wrong things. You don't trust me. You don't believe in me. You're not listening to me. And he says, you're even dead spiritually. That means there's no life to your spiritual life. You don't have a spiritual life anymore because it's dead right now. In other words, you can't hear me, and I'm not really paying attention to you. And until you decide to start listening to me and doing what I tell you, then I can hear you. I'll hear your prayers, and I'll work in your life. See, we get prayers not answered. We get wisdom that's withheld, direction and guidance, and all the things that we're going to need in life withheld from us simply because we refuse to listen to it. But because of Abraham's faith, he heard God's voice, he obeyed it, and understand this, he left everything he knew. He wasn't young, he was 75. He'd spent his entire life right there. He knew everybody, his family and friends were there. Everything about his life was comfortable. Everything his life was settled. And God uproots him and said, go. Where are we going? I don't know. Can you imagine the day? Put yourself in the picture of that. And here's Abraham. He's got a U-Haul and he's going out of town. Where are you going, Ed? Don't know. What are you going to do when you get there? Don't know that either. Why are you going, Ed? Not sure yet. Not sure. Who's first in our life? Who's most important? What's most important in our life? Are you willing to step out of your comfort zone? Because that's what we're about, aren't we? Now, the younger people may not worry about comfort. They can sleep under a tree on the ground and be all right. But the rest of us are about our comfort, right?
Yeah. Amen.
And we don't want anybody interrupting that. I mean, I'm to the point I don't want to go anywhere anymore. I want my bed. I want my place. You go. Tell me how it was, and I'll rejoice with you. But in Luke 9, the verse that Emily put there is in Matthew. But in Luke chapter 9, listen what he says. It gets really, really nasty. Luke chapter 9, just let me read a few verses, then we'll go on because we're running out of time. He was saying to them all, if anyone wishes to come after me, let him deny himself. You don't even hear that word anymore. Deny yourself. Are you kidding me? A diet? Isn't there a pill I can take? Isn't there a shot? Can't you carve this fat out? Can't you suck it out? I mean, there's what is it, Sunabella? Is that where they go in and they just get a vacuum sweeper and get it all out there? I want to sign up. All right. I don't want to deny myself. I want a Diet Coke and a hamburger. All right, let me go on. Whoever wishes to save his life, you're going to die eating that cheeseburger, I know. Whoever loves his life for my sake, he is the one who will save it. Listen to these words. For what does it profit a man if he gains the whole world and loses and forfeits his soul? I don't know, but I'm willing to take the chance. See, that's the problem. We are. You have to leave stuff behind. That's what he's saying. He left everything he knew behind. Now that takes some doing. That takes some nudging. That takes some faith. That takes some trust. That's called faith. He left friends. He left dreams. He left careers for his kids or grandkids that are coming up. You know, what about them? But he obeyed. He went. Did he understand it all? No. He just went because God said go. Do it because I told you so. Your parent ever tell you that? I get frustrated with Sean sometimes. Do it because I told you so. I'm tired of explaining it to you. He should have been a lawyer, but he went another direction. Okay? Do you want God's plan or do you want your plan? And the answer is too many times we want our plan. Because we know what it looks like, we know what we think it looks like. Now, if you'd have known what you know now, would you have invested in gold, McDonald's, and Walmart? You'd have more money than Elon Musk, right? But the problem is there's consequences to doing it our way that we don't know about and we don't want to hear about. It depends on how you want to live life. There's the second part. Hebrews 11:9, he talks about his life and how he lived it. God put him in the area of a promise into a holding pattern. He wasn't sure whether he was in the promised land yet or not, but God put him in a holding pattern. Why did he do that? It's not enough you ask him to leave everything at 75 and pack up with the family and everything and leave everything behind. Now you got me in a holding pattern. Why? Do you trust me? Believe me? You ever been on vacation with kids? Are we there yet? Are we there yet? You haven't left the driveway. Are we there yet? You know we're impatient. But he put him in that holding pattern. Are you going to keep trusting me even though you can't see it yet? Do you still believe? Are you hanging in there? Why is he doing that? He's preparing you for the promise that he's going to give you. And he's preparing you for that promise. Now, before you make any decisions, you might want to ask yourself, probably I ought to check in with God about this because I don't know how it's going to turn out. I know how I want it to turn out, but I don't know how it's going to turn out. See, we can mess up in two ways. One is we choose not to wait if we're impatient. Or we choose not to allow God to change us and give us the right way to handle something. Abraham, you got to understand Abraham's life wasn't all perfect. He had lying going on. He had cheating. He slept with his maid because he was trying to accomplish the will of God, being opposed to the will of God. God didn't tell him to do that. He decided that's the way the plan would unfold. God's plan would unfold, and God never told him to do that. Listen, I've had people over the years, and you know what I'm talking about, people that have done everything under the sun wrong, and they would say, God told me to do this. And I want to think, let me just shoot you right now and get it over with because you're missing a whole lot and maybe never get it. Okay, let me go on. Abraham needed to come to his senses. Do you ever need to come to your senses? All right. If we could find it. He or we need to trust God, especially when there's no movement on God's part. You ever set a time for somebody to come fix something and they say, well, they don't even say 10 o'clock anymore. They said, how about a window? 8 to 12. Well, you can figure on it's going to be about 12:30, right? Or if you're building something, a contractor will tell you 2 weeks, and God doesn't know what 2 weeks means. Not in a contractor's point of view. Because they're busy, and they'll tell you 2 weeks, but they don't know when they can get to you because they got a lot of business, right? Did you ever mess up and make promises to God? If you get me out of this, I'll never do this again, and you lied and didn't do it. Now you were shaking your head until I said lion and you didn't do it. Then the heads froze. Well, Romans 12, you ought to read that sometimes, Romans 12:2 out of the Message translation. It says in yours, don't conform to this world, be transformed by the renewing of your mind so that you might know what is good and acceptable and perfect. Those are good things. You want something good, acceptable, and perfect in your life, right? But you may not want to do it God's way to get it. Don't forget Egypt. In the Promised Land, it took them 40 years. They should have been there in a few weeks. It took them 40 years. Why? Sin. Take another lap. Sin. Take another lap. You ever feel like you're going in circles? Take another lap. I've taken some laps. Going around new circles. Okay. Take another lap. This looks familiar. Take another lap. Been there before. Take another lap. Listen, folks, there's going to be some mountains in front of us. Jesus talks about this. He says, if you have the faith of a mustard seed, you can move that mountain and tell it to go anywhere you want it to go, and it'll go. Don't believe it. There's going to be some valleys you're going to get in that you can't get out of. You don't know how to get out of them. You don't even know how you got in it. There's going to be some hills to climb that you just think are impossible to climb. You can't do it. There's going to be some water so deep you're not going to be able to navigate. The more you get stuck, the longer it's going to take to wait on God to do what he wants to do in your life. Okay? Now, finally, he says, where do we look? And Abraham looked to God. He left his comfort zone. He left it all behind, unknown, and he let God change him in the process because he had to, or he'd have never kept saying yes and yes and yes and kept going in the direction God told him to go. He would have just said, look, I forget this. We're never going to get there. I'm going back home. And you would have probably said, amen, right? How did Abraham survive? Focus. Focus. Fix your eyes on me, he says in Hebrews 12:2. Get rid of things that trip you up. Fix your eyes on Jesus. Focus. So you don't give up and quit and miss God. Your kingdom come. Your will be done. Get heaven's advice and get God's perspective on your life and your situation, and you'll do far better. Do you believe that? That's faith. Okay, let me read you some words here. I love this. Let me read you some words here of a song. The old prophet Jimmy Cliff. Okay? I can see clearly now. The rain is gone. I can see all the obstacles in my way. Gone are the dark days and the clouds that have blinded me. It's going to be a bright, 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 sunshiny day. It's going to be a bright, 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 sunshiny day. I think I can make it now. The pain is gone. And all the bad feelings have disappeared. Here is the rainbow that I've been praying for. It's going to be a bright, 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 sunshiny day. I'm looking all around, and there's nothing but blue skies looking straight ahead. Nothing but blue skies. That was an old song played back in the 60s or 70s. But that's what we're looking for. We're looking for those brighter days. We're looking for God to come through. We're looking for God to do what he promised he would do, what he told us we would do. But until we decide to do what he asked us to do, none of those things are going to happen. And you're going to be walking around the circle, taking another lap. He says, remember, nothing will happen in your life that God doesn't okay first. You understand that? God is in control of everything. When you trust him, you don't have to worry about what's happening around you. You understand when you're focused on Jesus, the world can be falling apart and you're okay. What's next? You're good because you have perspective, godly perspective. Remember, faith is believing God is telling the truth. That's going to simplify following God a whole lot. When you understand he's telling you the truth, he wants best for you, you're going to understand when he tells you to do something, just do it. I fought my mother and my dad all the time about anything and everything. I was a teenager. I knew everything. Okay? I forfeited a lot of good things that could happen in my life because I was a tad stubborn. A stubborn and obstinate young man. There will be, remember, he said, there's going to be pain in your life. There are going to be tough times. But keep your focus on me. When you take your focus off me, you're in trouble. Now, let me close with this. Paul said this. This one thing I do, listen to this. Paul said, PhD, scholar, top of the class, top of his profession, becomes a Christian. This one thing I do, I forget what lies behind because it will destroy me if I do. Quit looking at your past. Quit looking at all the things that happened to you in your past. And look at me. Look at the future. Look at me. Jesus said in the Transfiguration, the Father showed up in the Transfiguration with Peter, James, and John. And he said, listen to me. This is my son. Listen to him. This is my beloved son. Listen to him. Listen to God. Leave things behind that will destroy you. Get rid of them. Go where God tells you to go. Do what God tells you to do. Learn what he's trying to teach you. Keep your eyes on him. Get his perspective, and he'll help you navigate every aspect of life and will bless you beyond what you can comprehend. But here's the bottom line. It's your choice. It's your choice. And you're going to make a decision this morning or the rest of your life, every single day, whether you're going to do that. And if you need to make that decision, then make it. But make the right one, because the wrong one is the wrong road. Let's be standing as we stand.
Not quite.